It's December 218 BC and Hannibal has invaded northern Italy. He is outnumbered and needs a victory to steady the support of local tribes. But he has laid a trap for the Romans and is confident of victory. Today's video is a quick strike after action report of the Battle of Trebia using Simon Miller's To the Strongest rules. I originally ran this game for the rejects in the Shed of War back in 2019 and decided it was too good not to attempt to play as a solo game in my operations room. So here is my solo refight of the Battle of Trebia. Trebia was the first major battle of the Second Punic War. Having crossed the Alps with his army, Hannibal was eager to strike at the Romans to consolidate his position and help convince local tribes to join him. There had been a clash between the two sides a month earlier when Hannibal had nearly killed Consul Publius Cornelius Scipio in what became known as the Battle of Equites. Now the second consul, Tiberius Sempronius Longus, has marched his army up the length of Italy and joined forces with Scipio. Hannibal is outnumbered, but confident he can goad the Romans into attacking him on ground of his own choosing. Both sides had been sending out cavalry, and a few days earlier some of those scouts had clashed. Hannibal could see the danger in being drawn into a full-scale battle he was not prepared for, so he ordered his troops back to the relative safety of the camp. Longus was ecstatic. As far as he was concerned, he'd just beaten the Carthaginian general, and now he was spoiling for an all-out decisive battle. Hannibal's spies relayed this information, and the crafty Carthaginian commander saw an opportunity. Over the next few days, the Numidian cavalry probed the Roman defences, making a nuisance of themselves. Sempronius was angry and frustrated, so when a much more concerted raid was launched at his camp early one morning, he decided to seize the initiative and attack with his whole army. Hannibal had deliberately launched this feint attack at first light, confident that the impetuous Longus would take the bait. The consul responded just as Hannibal had hoped, and having seen off the Numidians, roused his whole army and began marching after them, chasing them back across the icy-cold river Trebia. It took some time for the units to form up again on the far bank, but Hannibal was content to let the hungry, soaking wet and by now very cold legionaries get into position. He had an ambush prepared and needed the overconfident Roman commander to march his army into the trap. According to Polybius, the plan was set in motion the night before the battle. Hannibal had called his younger brother Mago to his tent. He ordered him to take a small force and hide overnight in an overgrown valley beside the planned battlefield, and at the right time launch an ambush on the rear of the Roman army. As Longus marched his cold and hungry legionaries towards Hannibal's line, he had no idea how comprehensively he had been played and the scale of the disaster that was about to befall his army. In the original game, I got around the fact that this was Trebia with its well-known ambush by lying to the players and telling them that it was another battle. For obvious reasons, my deception plan won't work when playing the game solo. To overcome the surprise element, I decided to play the Carthaginians and devised a simple programmed strategy for the Romans based on random dice rolls and a historically weighted table of tactical options for certain circumstances. As with previous games of To the Strongest, I have replaced the use of playing cards for D10s because there isn't space on the table for cards when using 6mm figures. Purple for the Carthaginians, red for the Romans, yellow for attack rolls, and green for saving throws and rallies. The Romans were the attacking army, so they moved first. Historically, it took a long time for the inexperienced legionaries to form up once they had crossed the river. To replicate this, I rolled for a random delay, 3 turns, as the infantry get themselves lined up. While the infantry organised themselves, the Velites moved forward, expecting the enemy light troops to do the same. The Carthaginians, however, remain on the higher ground, so the Velites move forward and begin throwing their javelins. The Carthaginian slingers hold back, using their range to pick off the Romans as they advance. Then the Numidian light horse on both flanks move towards the centre, adding their own javelins to the stick-throwing contest. The skirmish battle lasts several turns, with both sides losing infantry and cavalry units. This is a net win for the Carthaginians, although their right flank is now very weak. With the javelins expended and the Velites unwilling to melee uphill, both sides back off. The Romans return to their starting positions while the Carthaginian light troops retire behind the main line. The Balearic slingers moved to the right flank to support the weakened cavalry there. With the skirmish battle over, the legionaries are finally ready to move forward. Again, the Carthaginians stop at the top of the slope, gaining the advantage of defending favourable ground. Longus urges his men on and they charge uphill into the Carthaginian line. As each cohort charges in, the legionaries throw their pilum, causing a couple of hits on the enemy. However, fighting uphill is tough, and the advantage of defending favourable ground lets the Gauls and Spanish that make up the bulk of the centre hold their position. Both sides start picking up disorder markers, but the Roman quincunx formation can absorb this with their line exchange mechanism. The manoeuvre relies on a successful rally save, which relieves the Hastati with the Principe, removes a disorder marker, improves their save and throw from 7+ to 6+, and replenishes their pilum shock weapon. Faced with refreshed legionaries, all the Spanish and Celts can do is fall back and attempt to rally their own disorder. Fortunately, they are retreating further uphill, so retain their height advantage against the next push by the Roman juggernaut. Drawing the Romans after them also forces them deeper into Hannibal's trap. The ambush force under Mago is now placed on the table, moving to the edge of the overgrown valley. The Romans can't see them yet, but from next turn the Carthaginians will begin rolling to see if the ambush is launched. All they have to do is not throw a 1. The moment comes to launch the ambush, and I rolled a 1. I wouldn't be able to attempt this again until next turn, which could prove costly if the Romans continue to advance in the centre. The Carthaginian centre is dealt a heavy blow when first a Spanish Scutari regiment and then one of the Gaulish warbands are broken and removed from the table. There is now a gaping hole in the Carthaginian line, and it looks as if the Romans are on the verge of victory. At last Mago's cavalry appears from their hiding place and attacks the Roman flank. The charge sweeps away the Velites and swings behind the legions, who are too busy pressing the Carthaginian lines to react. It is possible to detach the Triarii, but at this stage in the battle, none of the cohorts are in a fit shape to do this, and there is little the Roman commander can do to stop the attack on his flank. The Romans have already lost several units by this stage of the battle, and despite cutting through the Carthaginian centre and scenting victory, they are closer to breaking themselves than they realise. As Mago's ambush rides down one of the cohorts, the Roman army finally breaks, handing victory to Hannibal. My version of Trebia had a few surprises, and when the end came it almost took me by surprise, but it was nonetheless a strong victory for the Carthaginians. Pleasingly, the outcome replicated some of the features of the historical battle, in that the legions broke through the centre of Hannibal's line even as their flanks were crumbling. Only 10,000 Romans out of an army of 42,000 were able to cut their way to safety. Victory at Trebia secured Hannibal's position and drew in support from northern tribes just as he had hoped. In June the following year, Hannibal destroyed another Roman army at Lake Trasimene, and the following year encircled and destroyed a Roman army of 86,000 at the Battle of Cannae. This last battle is still taught in military schools to this day, but for my money Trebia is a more impressive victory. Here Hannibal used his opponent's own impetuous nature against him, anticipating Longus's reactions perfectly. Armed with that insight, Hannibal then used the weather and the landscape to devise a plan that drew the Romans across the swollen river, walking them into a trap laid well in advance, and all the while his own men were warm, well fed and psychologically ready for battle. Everything that could be stacked in his favour was, even before battle commenced, and it is for this reason that I believe Trebia shows the true genius of Hannibal as a battlefield commander.